My new book, Ragam Tanam Pallavi. Is it music? Or is it murder? Or is it a murder about music? My detective, Lali, is usually thought of as the last resort in homicide. But in this book, she confronts us with the strange announcement that she has committed murder. She can't remember anything more than that. And the truth is destroying her. She has to find out. And she can't because she can't remember when, where, or even whom she murdered. But she's very certain that she did. And the only clue she has is music. To begin with, she can't recollect what kind of music. And while she's trying to find out, she's confronted by a murder, which in some way seems to echo her memory. Connecting the two is the fabulous music of Muthuswami Dikshit. As she begins to look further into her memory and into the ideas that seem to grow around it, it feels like the exploration of a ragam. And then the evidence comes in, and she has to sift it over and over again. And that is the repetitive palindrome of a tanam. Finally, the story reveals itself as the Pallavi, which is the logical understanding of truth. Ragam, Tanam, Pallavi. I hope you enjoy it.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Studio 2. Let us begin our next session, Love, Loss, and Longing, with our esteemed guests. Our guest number one is Sandeepa Mukherjee Datta. Sandeepa Mukherjee Datta is a Bong mom, the nom de plume behind the very popular blog Mom Bong Mom's Cookbook. She has been entertaining her readers with food and stories for over 10 years and is the go to source for Bengali cooking on the web. An engineer by profession, she lives with her family in New Jersey, USA. Our second guest is Maya Lang. Dr. Maya Shanbhag Lang is the author of What We Carry, a memoir, named a New York Times editor's pick and an Amazon Best Book of 2020, and the 16th June finalist for the Audie Award for Best Audiobook. Lang's work has been featured in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, the Times of India, the Philadelphia Inquirer, among others. Recipient of the Neil Shepherd Prize in Fiction, she has received awards from the Rona Jaff Foundation, the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, and others. Our third guest is Shunali Khullar Shroff. Shunali Khullar Shroff is the author of the best-selling novel Love in the Time of Affluenza and Battle Hymn of a Bewildered Mother. Shunali writes for a host of publications on modern Indian life, travel, and feminism. This session will be moderated by Mona Verma. Mona Verma is an award winning author of 8 works of fiction. She has edited various science journals, self help books, biographies, and is a regular feature writer for online newspapers. Her books have been the subject of thesis for many research scholars, and excerpts from her book have been used in the ICSE ELT series. She is on board of various universities as an advisory expert. She co-owns Disha, a corporate training firm. She is the recipient of the Women of Substance Award, Hindustan Times Woman of the Year Award, and many more. We request Ms. Mona Verma ma'am to start the session.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, PILF, for having us on board. I do not see Maya here. Has she joined?
Is there an email from her? Should we check?
Uh, I don't see her. No. Okay. She hasn't joined. So, Sonia, can we go ahead with the program? With the panel discussion? Okay, okay. So thank you very much. So a very warm welcome to Sandeepa Mukherjee Datta and Shonali Khullar Shroff to this panel, Love, Loss and Longing. Love, loss and longing are almost synonymous to each other. I still have to come across people who've never experienced a loss or a longing for someone. Love, many haven't. True love, mostly haven't. But loss and longing is something which is a common thread of human emotions that flows through us. When I was reading about your books and watching your interviews there, one thing which was a common thread amongst all my three panelists today was discovery. All of you discovered something in the process of writing your books, be the emotional gaps or secrets from another part of the globe, or the ones hidden beneath the perfectly polished demeanors. And that is where we stumble upon our losses, the loves, and the constant longing to belong, to heal, and to be accepted. Since Maya is not here, I will not refrain from talking about her work and taking up other people's lives. So when it comes to Sandeepa, so if when I was reading about your work, one thing that I came across was that if those family stories and whatever's happened to us in our childhood or our growing up years, if all that shapes us, what happens when those stories are brought to us from another side of the globe and we shed our illusions about our past and work on the future and the present about what we know and what we can do. Those delicious letters is an absorbing and a truly delectable and moving book about what shapes us, where she speaks avidly about her mother's panache for cooking and how we cannot grow up until we fully understand the people who raised us through the sensory tactile imagery called nostalgia. And then Shonali writes a brilliant book, Love in the Times of Affluenza. So your work reminds me of a saying, chin up, princess, or the crown slips. That is what was, going on in my mind when I was reading about it. So here's a very honest examination of the weight we shoulder as women and an exploration of how we are judged and we are stereotyped and how we rise above them. So, going to the questions, my first question over here is to Sandeepa. When and how did you stumble upon blogging and that too about food, which is a very novel concept? There weren't many food bloggers to begin with. People were blogging about fashion, about literature, and you name it, but not food to begin with. Because it has been very important to Indians. That is one reason you brought up food, because our gatherings, be it celebrations or be it bereavements, they all revolve around food. So, was it a medium for you to pass on the legacy of Bengali food to the world outside, Sandeepa?
When I started blogging, it was many, many years back. That was when Google's Blogger platform had just started. And so being a geeky person, I was very taken by Blogger. Like it was a new thing then. And so, and at that time, I was not really much into cooking, but I loved food. But like most people, when you're closer to it, when you're home, and when your mom is cooking for you, you don't pay as much attention to it. I started paying more attention to it as an immigrant. The further away I went from home, not only as an immigrant to the US, even before, like when I left home to Mumbai for my first job. That's the time when I first started to learn to cook. And then when I came here, I the craving started more and more. Even the simple things, like even the everyday food, which I wouldn't even have maybe wanted to know when I lived there. Um, I wanted to know more about them. And once my kids were born, as you said, very, very correctly, that I wanted to pass on the flavors of my childhood, the food of my childhood to them. And so I would call up my mom, and ask her how to make this, how to make that. And like every mom, he would just give, the recipes, but no measurement, nothing, like a little of
Yeah.
this, a little of that, the standard way.
Yeah.
And so every day I made it, it would taste different, because like sometimes I would interpret it as a 1 teaspoon, the other day maybe 2 tablespoons. So and I thought, okay, like this isn't going anywhere, and I would forget, and every day there's no point calling her and asking her the same thing. So I said, okay, the blogger is like a journaling. It was a journaling medium at that time, and there were like a food community growing up at that point. Some people had just started food blogging, and I said, there's a good thing. Let me just write down here, and it will help me. So the primary concern was me. I wasn't thinking, yeah, I wasn't thinking of the world or anyone else. The primary person was me who would benefit from it. So that's how I started. I would translate it into the precise measurements and things like that. And it was a very close community at that time. This I'm saying way back in 2006, 2007, that time. So, and it was a very close food blogging community that grew up, like many people living across the globe, and it was really nice. So as we got into it, I started more from the food into writing, because I realized I liked writing more than the cooking part of it. Uh, so that's, oh, Maya has joined. Hi, Maya.
Hi, you guys. I'm so sorry for being late. I was having technical difficulties.
Hi, Maya. Welcome. Welcome to PILF. We've been missing you.
Likewise, I was having technical glitches on my end, and I apologize for the late entry, but please.
Not at all. We'll more than make up for it.
No.
So that's how it started, So not with any greater goal of or greater purpose in life, but that's how it all started.
Yes, I believe all those who understand Hindi over here will, understand the fact that when my mothers tell us that everything is andaze se, right?
Yeah.
You must have heard the same thing, andaze se and namak ke swad anusar, right? So you fail to understand what is the measurement, how do you calibrate that, right? So that will always be rigmarole we all are up against as new cooks. And then going to Shonali over here as an author and a compulsive reader who spent 2 brilliant books, Battle Hymn of a Bewildered Mother. Mothers are always bewildered for that matter, ask us. And Love in the Time of Affluenza, where you got rave reviews for your pithy, humor, lace style of writing, and replete with generous inputs from real life and parenting experiences. So, are these narratives cathartic?
I think a lot of. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Yep.
Yeah. So a lot of writing happens from the subconscious. So I think everyone here will agree we don't know why we write. We write because it's almost a compulsive need in us to write. When I, published my first book, at that time, I had been blogging for some time. And just like Sandeepa, blogging was very new back then. And I've had a background in journalism and whatnot, but blogging is what I did to hear myself think initially. And I think documenting my experience as a mother was really like assessing a hurricane storm after it's hit you. There were all sorts of emotions. There were comparisons that I did with my own upbringing. And I also spoke about postpartum depression in that, though I use humor as a tool to tackle it, because that is the tendency that I have as a person. I can smile at funerals and whatever. So the thing is, that's how that book came about. It was nonfiction. Uh, and I wouldn't call it cathartic, but I would say that a lot of my writing so far has been about making sense of this chaos called life. You know, you write to examine, to relive. I do a great bit of travel writing, which is about reliving. Uh, Remembering your childhood experiences is, again, it's very nostalgic. You relive it, but from hopefully from a distance. So it's a little bit of everything. It's catharsis. It's examining those moments, and it's very often it surprises you that, oh, I didn't know I felt like this about this. So
Yeah,
to that
yeah,
extent, it reveals yourself to you, because it sort of, how a lot of people go to spirit mediums to do auto writing, where some messages are being relayed from some other realm. I think to that extent, a lot of your writing is about revealing yourself to yourself. And it baffles me sometimes. I'm sure that Sandeepa, Maya, you'll agree with this, and Mona, you've written books yourself, that you're like, oh, I didn't know I felt like this about this. And sometimes I've written
yeah,
something that's really upset me, like patriarchy really upsets me. And I know it upsets Maya too. I've just finished reading a wonderful book.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I've been resentful of it, okay? And so when I started writing my fiction, I really didn't know what my plot was going to be. I just knew that there was something that really upset me, and I wanted to tackle that through my storytelling. And sometimes I had to stop and say that this is becoming like an angry book, and it had set off being a funny book, which is going to tackle a complex subject. So
Right.
that's the thing. And so that book was actually, it helped me to really understand that I feel too strongly about it. And while I was in the process, I became involved in a couple of feminist movements, because I was like, this is the envelope that I want to push. So
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
it was.
I so agree with you, Shonali, because even as a writer, I feel that writing helps you process whole lot of emotions. It is actually a foil to what lies inside. And that is why we write, because we are in our element when we write.
So,
It is not to prove a point to somebody else, it is to prove a point to yourself. So,
exactly.
coming back to for the first question to Maya now. So, Maya, the very concept of your book gave me goose flesh. I was literally, when I was reading about your book, the synopsis of your book, I was shaking. And I'm not lying here. I was shaking. I said, what is this? I have come across so many parents with dementia and Alzheimer's, and something like this kind of a revelation when a mother makes to her daughter completely breaks down all the barriers, brings down the veils. As in your latest book, you say that you grew up idolizing your mom, who was an accomplished physician. But when she gets Alzheimer's and is unable to remember the stories that she once told you, she divulges the secrets about her past that force you to re examine the relationship. Please tell us more.
Well, thank you. My mother was not only an accomplished physician, she was a geriatric psychiatrist. So she was an expert on Alzheimer's. And she actually ran clinical trials for Aricept, which is the leading Alzheimer's medication, which was the pill that I would place in the palm of her hand every morning when I became her full-time caregiver. For me, I never intended to write a memoir. I think of myself as a fiction writer. My first book was a novel. I was in the middle of working on my second novel when my mother was in sudden need of emergency care, and I had taken her to a doctor's appointment and they recommended hospitalization. And I just blurted out, oh, I'll bring her home with me. And it was not a situation we had ever discussed. But in that moment, impulsively, I couldn't imagine putting her in the hospital. So I drove her home with me, and my daughter was very young at the time. I was, I think, 3, and so it wasn't something that I expected to do. I wasn't in a place in my life where caring for my parent was on my radar as a fairly new parent myself. And what was so interesting, she had always been this kind of mythic, larger than life, intimidating, formidable woman. This was a woman who could make men quake because she had such a spine of steel. And she was so authoritative and commanding and fierce. And she had always told me these kind of mythic stories about her life in India and, pulling all-nighters to prepare for med school exams and her residency. And the one subject that she was always quite quiet about was motherhood. She never said too much. She always just said, like, oh, I don't know how I did it with you and your brother. I just did. Because I would ask her these questions like, wait, how did you juggle this? How did you do this? Because when I became a mom, I also struggled with postpartum depression. That's in my book. So Shonali, I relate to that. And, I started asking these questions of my mother, and she was very cryptic. And during her dementia, as I was caring for her, suddenly these secrets started coming out. And I thought, oh, you were never a superhero. You just gave me these highly curated stories because you wanted to see yourself that way. And because I think as an immigrant to America, the idea of being fierce and powerful in a landscape that was not always hospitable, I think that was her kind of armor. These stories were her kind of armor, and she liked being that character. And during her dementia, I really got to see the sort of person, the wizard behind the curtain, or the person beneath the armor. So it was eye-opening and shocking, but I'm also profoundly grateful that I got to see her humanity and her vulnerability and who she really was versus who I perhaps wanted her to be.
Yes. That is such a wonderful answer, Maya, there. Because as parents, there's so much that we camouflage, there's so much that we masquerade, right? Because we want our kids to see us the way we want them to see us, and not as what we are. So somewhere we are aligning with the onion theory there. So coming back to Sandeepa again, Sandeepa, when we are talking about food in the present times, the attitude towards the regional Indian cuisine has changed amongst the diaspora. Have you also felt that?
Yeah, definitely. And it's very exciting actually. Like growing up in a Bengali family, so so if you anyone in West Bengal you asked about South Indian food, all we knew is dosa and idli. We never knew anything more than that. But so it was very typical. Similarly about Bengali, all people used to say is Rasgulla or fish. But now I see a lot of interest, and not only the just regional cuisines, the micro cuisines like sub regions and things like that. So it's really very interesting because the only thing I wish for is I really want to see it beyond India. Because when you're outside India, all you see is the same kind of cuisine. You don't see that much, all these different varieties. I would really hope to see that. So
So
that
that
would
will be
really
quite
be
a shift
exciting.
from the conventional to a contemporary mindset of what exactly goes into the depth of creating a dish which is both traditional as well as which will be enjoyed in the contemporary times as well. Probably with a bit of a shift here and there, but it will be. Yeah. So Shonali, coming back to you, right?
That's true.
According to you, affluenza is a far grave pandemic. And do you think that love in the times of affluenza is any different from the love that we idolize? Unmute yourself, Sonali. Sonali, you got to unmute.
Yeah. So in my understanding, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So love, a desperate need for a human connection, heartbreak, infidelity, they exist in every strata of society. However, when you belong to a world of privilege, where both partners are very well educated with degrees from universities from around the world, and where you don't have to fight it out like professional working classes have to make your everyday existence work for you. I feel that even though things may start out by what is conventionally called love, which is what passion, mutual respect, a basic compatibility. So while things may start with that, at some level, it gets a little more transactional as emotions begin to ebb. There's a lot more at stake in terms of material one's, a material life. And so I realized that while in a professional working class family, it may split up because of basic incompatibility. In the so-called upper crust of society, people hang on to that for different reasons. And the privilege does not mean that it's free of shackles and patriarchy as far as women are concerned. So I noticed that women from a wealthier world feel as much passion and as much love, but they are possibly more stifled and shackled by the conventions that are thrust upon them by traditional society, because they feel that giving that up would tantamount to giving up everything else. You're not just, that's why movie stars' wives don't easily leave movie stars, because it's not any longer only about love and keeping a marriage together. There's just so much
Yeah.
else which is on offer. So, so that is affluenza. And then what happens is that when you're not getting love and attention from the person you expected from, you start filling up that empty void with all sorts of different things. Ladies' lunches and the new shoes and the new bags, and you know what I'm trying to say, by just
The retail therapy.
for validation from a retail, they're looking for validation from a world outside of you, and just becoming a fashion icon and uh, having the latest of everything essentially. So that's my examination of that world, and but that doesn't take away the fact that feelings are really pretty much the same everywhere. It just gets more transactional in that world.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. And also the fact that traditionally women in India have always been thought of as property. So just because you live in a world of privilege doesn't mean you're any less a property. In fact, now there's a retinue of people to keep an eye on you. Okay, so my whole premise of storytelling was to highlight the double standards that exist even in this society when it comes to women and marriage and adultery.
Yeah. Yeah, I so agree with you, Shonali. When things or your possessions become the definition of you, somewhere down the line you stand diminished.
You too.
Going back to Maya there, right? Because we've just received Maya on the panel. I want this question to do, Maya. Since your book, What We Carry, talks about the burden and is an autobiographical account of a very large and a very important part of your life. How honest can one be, or rather, how holistic can one's view be, considering there are many elements that come into play or go into making people and memories. So it is part fiction and part truth that goes into any book.
Yeah, so what's so interesting is that looking back now, having written this memoir that I never intended to write, I recognize that in my fiction, I was really always dancing around these issues, the abusive father, the mythical mother. Those themes have been in my writing. And so in my fiction, when I thought that I was exploring these characters who felt completely different from me, the whole time I really was writing about myself. I just didn't know it. And in memoir, it's funny, I had shared an early draft of the book with my brother to get his input, to also make sure he was okay with certain scenes. I said to him, my relationship with you matters to me more than this book, so I want to make sure you're okay with it. And I remember there were certain scenes where I thought, yeah, this I'm okay with. I don't need your input on these scenes. It's these other ones that I have questions about. And of course, the ones that I felt totally okay about, he said, well, actually, that didn't happen that way at all. And the things that I felt uncertain about, where I thought, wait, that childhood memory, did I hallucinate that? Did that?
Yeah.
The things that I felt most uncertain about, he said, no, that really happened. So we are not necessarily accurate chronologers of ourselves. But part of what I talk about in the book is storytelling, and how the stories we tell ourselves and the kind of myth making that takes place in families, and the roles that we take on in families of, oh, he's the smart one, she's the artistic one, that one's the comedian in the family. Those roles and identities and the stories around them, sometimes they turn out to be completely false, and we absorb these labels, we absorb these associations, and we carry them around with us, and they shape us. And yet later in adult life, we kind of set them down and think, wait a minute, I'm not necessarily the unathletic one, or I'm not necessarily who my family told me I was. And I think part of the freedom of adulthood, when we go to college or when we leave home for the first time, we get to tell our stories our own way.
Yes.
And I think stories, far from being frivolous, and I say this having grown up with two very scientific parents, physician and an engineer, who saw the world in very black and white terms, and had no room in their lives for stories. Yet, my mother turned out to be the biggest sort of fiction writer of them all, with all of these stories that she told me. I think the stories we tell, far from being frivolous or sort of ornamental, no, I think they are deeply vital, and they are attempts at self-assertion, and far from being sort of extraneous to life, they are central to life, and that they are always these attempts to locate ourselves and position ourselves and say, this is who I am.
Yeah. But considering that children always look up to their parents as larger than life, right? People who can't go wrong, people who have their back, your go-to pillar of support. How does a person come to terms with their role reversal following, the inevitable deterioration of health? Because I very vividly remember my mother in the hospital in the last few days with dementia, and she failed to recognize me. And I think there's never been a more painful memory or a moment in my life when you see your parent, your rock, right in front of your eyes, helpless and seeking your support. Your views on that, Maya?
Yeah, I think it is, first of all, the classic line about Alzheimer's is that there's a double grief. You lose the person when they die, but before that, you lose them as a parent. You lose your person. I actually think it's deeper than that. I think Alzheimer's is really a kind of 1,000 deaths, because every stage is so, every little moment where they slip away from you is so painful, and it's such a loss. And I will say at the same time that time I spent caring for my mother also contained these strange gifts, because I learned so much about who she had really been, as opposed to who she, presented as, or how she wanted me to see her. And to be able to see her as vulnerable and culpable and a human being, And to have these moments where she was suddenly leaning on me and relying on me, where I was really the mother figure to her. You know, she would turn to me much in the way that a child turns to a pillar. I became the pillar for her. That for me was in many ways, even when it was so fraught and difficult, it was a tremendous growth experience. You know, it's nothing I ever would have chosen. But I say in my book that, you know, diamonds, the way they are formed is a result of pressure and time, right? And no lump of coal would ever choose to become a diamond because it's too painful and it's too hard. You would never, you'd never opt into that juncture of having all of that weight put on you. But I really think that adulthood means setting down who we want our parents to be, and learning, you know, stepping into that place that they held and sort of letting go of who we want them to be. And you don't reach that next stage of your life of clarity and strength and brilliance. You don't get to become the diamond until you've been in that juncture of pressure and difficulty and uncertainty, and until you've submitted to that. So, you know, I think that's really the evolution and growth of adulthood. And I will also say that part of what I learned is that as I was caring for my young daughter at the same time, part of what I saw is that what falls away from us is always with us. You know, I see my mother in my daughter all the time. And she will do little things or say little things where I think I can feel God sort of like chuckling at me, because it's like, oh my God, that's my mother. And that's exactly.
That's so uncanny at times. Yes. I would relate this incident. Yesterday, I was taking a walk with my daughter, and she's 25 now, and there was a stray, and it started growling at my daughter. And I just pushed her aside and started walking on her side. And she said, "Thank God, Ma, you were here." And I said, I don't know what came upon me. And I just said, you know, it was a moment of love and unadulterated emotion. And I said, I always will be. And suddenly, Maya, at that point, I thought of you and your mom. And I said, what? If there's a role reversal that takes place, I just promised her I always will be.
Yeah.
So I could understand. I could empathize with that. And then moving to now Sandeepa again, you know, when Sandeepa also talks about her mother, her roots, you know, she's literally watering her roots through her recipes and the food and her writings when she writes those delicious letters, which is a story of Shubha, and which she wants to be the universal voice of women. And then there is Samir and their daughters, and then of an unknown old lady in the mysterious letters that Shubha starts to receive. What takes the story forward is an intriguing plot stapled with nostalgia. What was the greatest influence behind this book? Sandeepa? Sandeepa, you could unmute yourself.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. See, that's the time. I'm sleepy.
Doesn't matter. Because such a vibrant panel, you can't sleep. This is the first time I have such dazzling ladies in my panel, all three of them. Yes, Sandeepa, the answer.
No, I was totally taken by Maya's. You know, like I have to read her book. It's on my list, and so coming from there to my book, when you say influence, so there's the literary influence, and then there's the real life influence. So first, let me talk about the literary influence, because, you know, I don't know if any of you do, but I love reading food memoirs and food novels and food essays. So, I discovered them later in life, only after I started food blogging, but I'm a huge fan of them. Ruth Reichel, like Water or Chocolate, Mistress of Spices. I'm a big, big fan. So, and so even when I was writing my first book, which wasn't a fiction, and I wanted to read a book and the backdrop of Indian diaspora, where Indian food plays the main role. So, and I couldn't find it. Like, I didn't intend to write one, but I couldn't find one that I could, like really read and enjoy, like Under the Tuscan Sun or something like that. But I couldn't find one. And there was mention of food, obviously, in all Indian books, but nothing where food plays a major role. And and as they say, if you cannot find the book you want to read, write it. And so I just took that to heart and I wrote what I wanted to read. So that's how it came about, basically. And now the part that you say about the grandmother, the mysterious lady whose letters comes, and they unravel a totally different era and a time. That I would say does have a lot of influence from my maternal grandmother. So, whenever it comes to food and cooking and traditions, she was the one who followed more of the traditional festivals. Like if it's January, we'll do this, like we have something called Pithe. Like when the new harvest happens in January around Sankranti time, there are certain food that is cooked around that time of the month. So if it is summer, like these are the vegetables you cook only during summer. This is the fish. So that it was very in tune with, I would say, with season, what was locally
Very
available.
sharp divide was there always.
Yeah, very sharp divide was there, and that is what was sustainable, like you wouldn't eat out of what you were given by nature. So I wanted to bring that part in. That's how it came about.
But I must give this to you, Sandeepa. For quite some time, I've been looking out for a book where the author has seamlessly threaded together. There's a seamless amalgamation of stories with food, with recipes. Not very many people have delved into that, and this is just so awesome. So those are the books on my little
Yeah,
list up there.
I'll
Right.
send you the whole list. One I would suggest right now. I don't think many people have read this. I don't know if Maya knows. I think she's an Indian author, but from US, and I think she has written just one book called the Hindi Bindi Club. I love that book. That book too. It brings about food and letters and stories around it. So yeah, so if you get a hold of it, do read it.
Yeah, so this is something which feeds both your gut as well as your brain. What can be more wholesome than that,
Because
Sandeepa?
food is a
So,
very integral part of our life. Our
yes,
like right, like any happy memories and anything that we think of. Even when we go for vacations, like if you go on a vacation, we come back and talk about the food that we had. So it's a very
yeah,
integral part
yeah.
of our life, basically.
So we go on a diet before the vacation, and then we binge on everything that is visible to us. That is, we attack the table during the vacation. So finally, it is about food at the end of the day.
We
Going
don't
back to
have
Shonali and
time.
the the affluenza, how it plagues us. In your book, it is portrayed almost like a setback, just exactly the way starvation is. The constant craving to be accepted by these people, to be appreciated, and the unending pit of needs versus wants. Any particular incident out there, Shonali, that stirred the writer's pen?
I think it probably is whole lot of incidents and not just one thing that got me thinking about this. But the first notion that I really wanted to challenge was that men are
Mm-hmm.
supposed to pursue their goals
Mm-hmm.
to find fulfillment, and that family, wife, children, family life is uh, sort of almost uh, incidental, or if not incidental, it's something that is par for the course, but the main fulfillment of a human being or a man will
Yeah.
come from a greater purpose in his life. And even though we are living in a new world today, that notion still hasn't changed to a
Mhm.
very large extent. And women are expected to feel fulfilled
Staying in the
by,
shadows.
just her
Mhm.
marriage, her home, taking care of the child, probably give up their career. So
Yeah.
they are judged if they don't give it up
Yeah.
because you've neglected your kids. And if they give it up, then, who
Mm.
asked you to give up your career? Parents usually feel very let down when working girls give up, uh,
Yeah.
you know stop pursuing their dreams, and they make their children and their
Yeah.
home their dream. And I've definitely been through that sort of a bump in
Mm.
my life. So you have a husband who says, go and work. I haven't stopped you. You have a parent who says, go and work. But then you have this clinginess and this need in you to watch this wonder that you have created grow in front of your eyes. And in India, we always have the option of getting domestic help. And you were like, I don't want my child to be attached to her. I want the child to myself.
Mm.
Now, while all this happens, for a woman to want more is absolutely natural, if not straight away after childbirth, then at some point in her life, for her to want more and look outside of just
Mhm.
her little circumscribed life. So, for me, what happened was I used to notice the widespread unhappiness of women. And
Yeah.
if you see, there are three characters in my book. There is one who has made her peace with housewifery, and she's convinced herself as a protagonist that her three children and going to a gym and staying fit and shopping online is all there is to life, even though she comes from a professional household, but she's married into wealth. And the
Mm.
other woman who sets about to pursue her own passions when it comes to love, and I might even say sex. So this
Mm.
other woman in my book, Trisha, is somebody who never stops being a woman. She puts herself before her own need to find emotional fulfillment above her responsibility and role as a mother. And society harshly judges women like that. I got really inspired by a woman who I sort of know. I don't know her personally, but I know of her through friends, who's gone from a series of men and husbands and relationships, and she's on to possibly a fourth right now. And of course, I too was complicit in judging somebody like that. Though on the one hand, I would say, men can do it because,
Mhm.
they always say it's a man's need, um,
Mm.
and so why can't a woman? But actually, I really did judge her. I thought she was a very responsible mother, and she was a
Mm.
wanton hussy who only wanted to just go after attention from a certain man. And
Mm.
one day I was meeting a common friend of ours for lunch, and I brought her up, and she said, but Shonali, she's actually a very good person. So I said, please, that's really ridiculous. Okay. She keeps dumping her men and moving on and changing her, neglecting her children. And you say she's a really good person. And she's even stolen some friend's husband, by the way, in the process. So she said to me, no, aside from that, I mean, if she loves your husband, if she likes, fancies your husband, it's a problem. But other than that, she's very helpful. She's very charitable. She's deeply spiritual. And she's the first person to come and help people out. And she never, ever gossips. And I thought, oh my God, how easy it is for us to paint a woman who is supposed to be. Um, what do you say, somebody with promiscuous, perhaps with the same black paint, that she's a bad mother, she's a bad wife, she's a bad daughter, she's unlettered, she's everything bad under the sun. And I think we are, to that extent, women too are complicit in perpetuating that patriarchal notion. So these were some of the elements. And then there's a third woman in my book who's a millennial, and my observation is that millennials actually don't attach too much importance to just that one relationship in their life, which is very liberating. And she gets a fulfillment just from her own identity and her profession. So I wanted to tackle three different kind of women and their inner lives, and see how their paths would take, what journeys they would set off on, and how it would end for them. And which is why my book starts. The opening scene is a woman's being caught of indulging in adultery. So
Mm.
that really were the factors that inspired
So the
me to.
mainstays in all the three books by the three authors has been love of a kind, loss of a kind, and the longing for it. So coming to the last set of questions, because we have barely couple of minutes left, so just a minute for every answer. Coming to other side of Maya, which I never knew, to be honest, which Maya highlighted, that to discuss about her journey of being a competitive caliber weightlifter. So, how does weightlifting relate to what women carry, and what has been your experience? What has your experience as an athlete taught you?
Yeah, it's so funny because I always thought that before I became a mother, I had it, Shunali, similar to what you were talking about. I had this idea in my head that once you become a mother, your life becomes one of sacrifice and suffering, and that maybe you can sort of achieve things despite having children. What I found actually once my daughter was born, that it was as though there was a mirror held up to my life, and I suddenly saw myself in new ways. And I thought, like, one thing I thought was that, wait a minute, I want my daughter to have a joyful and empowered relationship to her body, but she's never going to have that unless I model it for her. And I don't want her to pick up certain messages. I want her to see me as someone who's passionate about fitness or about sports, and to see me as someone who is strong, not just emotionally or intellectually, but physically. And so I got into weightlifting. And one thing I learned, I was really reluctant and terrified, actually, at first. I had all these lower back issues. My lower back was this huge problem, as it is for so many stressed out people in contemporary life. Right, we all have this. One of the first things I learned is that my lower back actually wasn't weak, which is what I had always thought. My lower back was overstrained because it was doing too much. And I had this moment where I suddenly thought, oh my God, the lower back is really the woman or the mom of the body. Here we are doing too much. We're overstrained. We're overextended. And what do? We blame ourselves for being weak. And we think, oh, I need to be stronger. Physiologically in the body, the cure for lower back issues is to get other parts of your body stronger. So you need your core, your glutes, your thoracic muscles. Once you get all of those muscles stepping up, it relieves the pressure on the lower back. Your lower back is way too strong, but too much strength can be its own form of weakness.
Because Maya, we women fall into the perfection trap, right? And we fail to delegate. That is where we start going wrong. So coming back to quick question to Sandeepa before we wind up the chat here. So how difficult was it to stitch together a story of a marriage, of intergenerational love, of life coming full circle through the mainstay of food? How difficult was it?
I found it really, really fun. Writing was my relaxing time after a whole day of work. After 11, when the kids had gone to bed, that's when I would sit and I would feel like God, because, I was creating characters, doing things to their lives, which I wouldn't be able to maybe in real life. So it was a lot of responsibility. So, but it was a lot of fun. So, because fiction lets you take some liberties, which can help you in a memoir. And so it was, I would say I did not, I started missing it, once the final draft was done, and I kind of delayed it. I think I wrote it over 4 years where I could have done it over 2 years. But that was my time after 11 writing that book. I didn't want to give it up. So
it has been such an enlightening discussion with women who have written these brilliant books, and not just these books, but books before these as well. But I think the basic element of writing was always the love, the loss of love, and hence the longing for it. For Maya, it was losing her present to a past she never knew that really existed, and the past now beats inside her like a second heart. For Sandeepa, it is, I'm reminded of something that tell me what you eat, and I will tell you who you are, right? Now, even our Upanishads, the Chandok Upanishad in Adhyay 6 and Khand 6 and Vakya 5 says something, Annamayam hi soyam manha. That means mind is made of the anna that you eat. So eating does not merely filling up the stomach to satisfy your hunger, rather it's a yagya karma. And then Shonali, I was reminded of a quote I read long time ago, and it says that what pleasure can those over happy persons know who, from their affluence and luxury, always eat before they are hungry and drink before they are thirsty. This was by Samuel Richardson, I think. So thank you, ladies. Thank you, Manjari Prabhu and Team PILF for and our certainly our audience for your presence and egging us on. Thank you, Maya, Shonali, and Sandeepa. This has been such a fantastic conversation, and I hope we meet on more panels to discuss your future books and your bookers, which I wish you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mona. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so
Thank
much, everyone,
you.
for such an interesting session. We are sure that it was a very intriguing session for all our guests. We begin our next session, that is series versus standalone books, the effort and the market, after a short break. Please join us for the same at 3:15 p.m. Thank you.